For those of you that are just jumping on, we've got Blake Ginther from Winston-Salem, and we'll let Blake kind of tell more about himself. I've known Blake for a couple of years now. We met as OPs. He runs a powerful team, which he'll tell us more about. He's runs a great business. I really appreciate and admire his leadership that he's done and how he's grown his team. And most importantly, I'm not gonna lie, I think the best part, the reason he's on here is he's actually really, really funny. And that's, as we all know, is one of the most important parts of real estate. So yeah, that's that. I'll turn it over to Vince to kind of jump into the questions so we can learn more about you.
Awesome. So yeah, Blake, let's get right into it, man. We really appreciate you being here. And I couldn't have put it better myself. As Joseph did, it's just a super collaborative group. Looking to pick your brain. So let's start. Who is Blake, and what would you say your superpower is?
So I'm an Ohio boy. Sorry for if that. I know there's a lot of Ohioans in South Carolina. So that might make people immediately dislike me. But I did grow up in Akron, Ohio. My family is still crazy enough to still live up there. Married a Southern lady, married a Georgia girl who was going to, whose family moved to Winston-Salem for her to go to School of the Arts. We were both in acting in a past life. That's why I started in real estate in New York City. Moved down here to Winston to raise a family. It was Winston-Salem, Akron, Ohio, Winston-Salem, Akron, Ohio. We are in North Carolina, and because of that, and I would say, the superpower thing, I've never been asked that before, so I had to think a little bit about that. And I think it's understanding people, and that starts with I have a BFA in theater. I make a lot of jokes about how incredibly intelligent I am, how hard that was to get a BFA in musical theater, specifically musical theater. I obviously don't take myself too seriously in life. And I think that allows me to, to take it all in and to read humans, meaning you have to be really innately, to be an actor, you have to be really in touch with the things that are inside of you, good and bad. And I think that has been very key for me to, with clients and in business, in learning about others.
That's awesome. Talk about how did you make the jump to real estate? And then, start there, and then I'll ask another question about understanding your strengths, because that was a really, really good point that you made there. So how did you make the jump to real estate?
So I couldn't, as most actors are between gigs, they wait tables. I couldn't do it anymore. My soul would not allow me to wait tables anymore. I waited through high school and college and then New York City, and I had the meanest Irish manager. She was so mean. And I just went, I can't do this. And I remember on a lunch break calling my mommy saying, "Mommy, I can't do this anymore." I was 22, I think, 22, 23. And she said, well, honey, you wanted to be in real estate, but you weren't smart enough. So I wanted to be an architect, but you weren't smart enough. So why don't you get into real estate? Why don't you, sell houses or something, and so, or sell condos or help people. Didn't you just pay somebody a couple $1,000s to rent an apartment in New York City that they didn't even show you? And I remember being like, yes, I can be that terrible person who makes a couple $1,000s without doing anything. So I got my license.
I love it. So how have you kind of used that strength of understanding people, understanding yourself at a really high level, and then your background as an actor to bring massive value to clients, as well as lead a bunch of people? You build a big real estate business. You own a brokerage. So how have you led people understanding your strengths and kind of leverage that strength of being an actor?
Okay, well, so I think the best strength, I think the key to leadership is, I think the key to success is knowing your strengths and weaknesses. I think that you can't begin to leverage yourself in any capacity if you're not aware of your weaknesses and strengths, and also finding peace in the fact that, by the way, people might really like things that you don't like, and oftentimes we're not good at things we don't like. And so the very first beginning of leverage for me was and leading was to just come clean with those things that I didn't like, and go, oh my God, you like paperwork? What's wrong with you? You're hired. And fail forward, and being also incredibly blunt and aware that I was going to make mistakes, and that I was going to be quick to fix those mistakes.
Yeah, that's so essentially what I heard you say is by understanding your strengths, you could figure out where you should hire so that you can bring people in that can kind of fill the void that was left from your weaknesses, as well as be very quick with kind of firing that individual if it didn't work, because you had to continue to move toward whatever goal you had.
And moving on the bus, Good to Great's one of my favorite books, and Seats on the Bus, right? I mean, a lot of times as you're growing and you're creating new opportunities, they might be great people that you just pushed onto a seat because you needed them to be in that seat, and it's just not the right seat for them.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So in the questions that we sent over to you, we talked about in building your business, what has been the most challenging obstacle that you've had to overcome, and you said yourself. So talk more about that, as well as how people are such a necessary role in what you've been building.
Well, I mean, so I said myself because, I mean, we always are the key component to success and failures. And I wasn't able to think, we see ourselves certain ways, right? And then when we start to find the success, we hold ourselves, we keep ourselves in a certain spot. And first it was, so I hired admin, and great, I was able to do a lot more transactions, but I wasn't going to be able to grow much past that, because I was back to working just as many hours as I was before I hired the admin. And I had to realize that saying, people don't choose to work with me because of me, they choose to work with me because of the level of service I provide. Well, I realized that the level of service I was providing was on its way down. I was working too hard. And so again, I had to find people that I could trust, who I knew would provide the level of service. And then to go another step, I had to realize that, by the way, they might be better than me. There might be people who could do some of the things that I'm doing that I like, and they do it better than me. And then kind of, finding, that ego, putting the ego aside. And then when you do that, you grow, and new things, new amazing things present themselves.
Talk to that, like as you were growing, how did you determine what trajectory you wanted to make sure you were on? And then as those opportunities crept up and presented themselves, how did you decide which ones to take? How did you continue to lead the team through opening doors for people? Talk to that a little bit more, if you don't mind. Yeah,
I mean, a big part of that was KW. I was with a couple companies prior to, and when I moved from New York down to Winston, I interviewed with every company in town but KW, because KW had not a great reputation in Winston, and it shut down shortly thereafter. And my own company approached me about becoming a partner in this little boutique, and it piqued my interest. And then shortly thereafter, KW approached me about relaunching, and I was like, oh, I mean, that's that company had a terrible reputation. I didn't know anything about KW, but I ultimately was so busy, I was like, no. And then a friend of mine was like, you might want to explore it. So I started to, and then of course, almost immediately, the partners at my old firm were like, nah, you know what? Just kidding. 2 of us are on board, 2 of us aren't. It's not going to be a thing. So then it made me even more inquisitive to check in. And look around and explore options. And what I learned when I would go to classes, KW classes, by the way, before I was with them, what I learned was I really didn't know a ton about real estate as a business, right? I knew it as a salesperson. I knew sales, tricks and gimmicks, some scripts. Nobody called them scripts at my previous company, but that's what they were, right? And but I didn't know business. And so when one big opportunity that presented itself was to launch a KW, and I had no idea that the benefits that would bring to my team, just from a business perspective and a growth mindset perspective, and just acknowledging, becoming aware of all the things we don't know.
Yeah, that's an awesome answer. So understanding kind of where your team is, and Joseph, do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, I'd like to really quickly on that the aha you had regarding learning it more as a business. That's interesting because you don't hear a lot of people admit that kind of as bluntly. We always say, well, agents don't treat it as a business, whatever it may be. What do you think was kind of the biggest thing when you, because that was probably when you were still a smaller team, you and maybe some admin, like what was the biggest thing for you that you were like, you feel your mind shifted from being an agent to being a business owner? Was there any one thing that kind of jumped out?
I mean, I think it was knowing the numbers, right? Knowing
Okay.
the data. And
Okay.
I think that a lot of agents are like, well, I do know the data. There's 111 active listings and there's 213 under contracts. Well, that's some data, but do you know the data of your business? Do you know the finances? Do you know where you spend your money? Do you know the return? Do you know the ROI? Do you know, have you thought about where else you're going to market? Have you thought, just basically more than just the sales data, but like the business data, right? And that's something that I used to joke to my director of operations and director of sales when I brought them on, and that was when my life changed, when I made some key hires, was that I said I was a champion-ish. I played the game of ish, like at a very high level. I think I was truly Olympic-ish. What are your numbers? They're like, 700-ish.
Right.
So you like to round. So you would round the numbers. I typically round up. More fun that way.
Yeah, I mean, the Ohioan in me always rounds down because it's always going to rain in Ohio. It's always like,
And to be fair, Vince doesn't round up. He exaggerates up.
Yeah, that's a good
Not
clarification
rounding.
on that. Yeah.
Not rounding.
Ish.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. So, so talk to me about the way that you manage your time. So like one of the topics that we've talked about a lot in this group is as we grow, as we scale, how do we manage our time, especially during COVID? Like we've been on these all the time, right? And we have doubled down on communication typically, right? There's a lot of uncertainty. What are you doing to manage your time, especially with all the irons that you have in the fire?
Well, I mean, I think the very first few weeks of this, man, we over Zoomed and we under calendared, right? We kind of abandoned some of the core principles of time management, I think. And I mean, I'm not going to say we. I don't know if you guys did. I did. I totally had the whole first few weeks. I was like, oh my gosh! I get the text of like, hey, where are you? Right? Because I was supposed to be in some Zoom, and I just didn't calendar it. And I do think that in our old life, pre-COVID, we absolutely, I think, top producers understood they had to have everything calendared, and you had to follow it. And the worst days were when you didn't have enough on your calendar. I would find that the days I went home the most exhausted is when I had a 4-hour open period, and I was like, today's gonna be awesome. I might even go golfing. And then of course it ends up being the poop day that I get everything being sidetracked all day long. And I think that might still be the case for some folks. And I think that for that to change, they're going to have to literally calendar block. their touch calls. They're going to have to calendar block their follow-ups. They're going to have to calendar block. And by the way, if it doesn't fit in, then don't do it. I mean, and people have to start being selective on Zooms. You don't have to listen to some schmuck from Ohio for 20 minutes. I mean, what's he helping you with?
We're waiting to see, actually.
We're still trying to figure that.
TBD.
We're figuring it out slowly but surely. So how do you prioritize then? How would you prioritize? With that said, and understanding that you have to calendar everything. Because I agree. I mean, I've been in the same boat where it's like you have a big gap and you're like, oh, this is going to be a great day. I think that was a really big aha I just had.
That was a huge aha.
And then it's like, the crap's hit the fan and I'm exhausted when I got home. You don't feel purposeful. You don't feel productive. No, nothing. And so how do you select and how do you prioritize if that makes sense?
What's the number one moment at hand? Like, what's the number one thing to propel you forward that very moment, right? And mine really hasn't changed much the last couple months. And a few years ago, I was super proud of the fact that I got out of production. I will never, ever say that. Plus, I probably shouldn't do air quotes again, and I won't. But I won't. I am forever going to be a realtor, right? I mean, I don't know when I'm not going to be a realtor. And for my friends and past clients, yeah, I'll play a role in their purchases and sales here. I mean, I'm going to partner. I'm going to partner on every one, but I'll play a role. And by the way, I actually do have time for that because I've leveraged off some of the other stuff that means less to me, candidly. So I pick what matters most to me, and right now, well, especially the last 10 weeks, connecting with them and just checking in. It shouldn't have been any easier, right? How you doing?
Yeah.
Those simple care calls, which really should have been always happening, have I think started to happen at a better clip because they're easier for folks. And so, but that's most, if you're a realtor and you want to sell a house, like that's your number one.
Yep. That makes sense. So talking to your people.
With the, just go talk to people, right? It's just that easy. With your time blocking, there's two schools of thoughts on time blocking, and some are, it's the 80-20, right? Like, time block your big rocks, get those done, and then leave some free space. But it kind of sounded like you said earlier, when you have too much free space, that's when the chaos gets started. Talk to me a little about that. I mean, are you one of those people that does like, if you take someone like Ken Tipple, like he's time blocked start to finish and gets a lot done, where do you fall on that spectrum? Do you time block the majority of your day, or do you just do the big rocks and then let things go?
So currently I'm time blocking more specifically.
Okay.
Because what happened was I started getting more and more big rocky. And then that's when I realized I got less done, less accomplished, and I felt exhausted. So I'm actually, like yesterday, it was a super productive day. It had to be because it was Monday and Tuesday. I don't know if you guys knew that, but it was. And so I literally put 15-minute, like, calling this client, right? It had a client's name, 15 minutes set aside. And those are the days where I do feel like I crushed it. The days that I'm like 1 to 3 blank, 4 to 5 blank, I get less accomplished and I feel more exhausted.
Interesting.
Yeah. And Joseph, you're right in that it's different for everybody, right? Like you talk about, I know people that are time blocked. They time block their whole morning. They time block their drive, the whole 9 yards. And it sounds like we're kind of a happy medium between that and those individuals that just time block their 20%. I tend to be like, the big rocks are usually on my calendar, and maybe it's not the most productive. So it's a big aha for me. When it comes to leading your team, what are some of the things that you're saying to your team and to the people that you work with, as well as to your clients, so that you can bring the best level of service through these times?
So I think this was a key. I forget, somebody said this a couple weeks ago, and it really resonated with me. It's nothing new. It's just something I needed to hear at that time, which is I was taking on, and this is true from a leadership perspective, sometimes, and a lot of times in life, we take on things that really aren't ours to take on. And then, pandemic hits and all of a sudden people are taking on their client stuff. I mean, we're taking on, like, we're carrying stuff that's really not ours to carry. And you can only control what you can control. And right now, currently, there are two things we can control: our mindset and our actions, our activities. And I think that there's a lot of forest and trees, a lot of lost in that. And it's like, you just got to dumb it down to control what you can control. And right now, for a lot of us, it's just put 10 names in your calendar and touch them, contact them, see how they're doing. Don't touch them. I think CDC says stay 6 feet away from them, but connect with them 6 feet apart. And, I think I used to get so annoyed when I would like go to classes or masterminds and people would say such simple stuff like make your contacts. And yet we do right now. I think it's the most important. A, it's the easiest because you can just reach out like you care. And B, it's going to require more communication for the foreseeable future. Yeah. So, adjust to that and don't take on the weight of the world, because it's pretty heavy right now. I mean, it's heavy.
Yeah. What would you say, like, when you have clients, and because that was great advice, by the way, as you're talking to clients or when you're talking to your team that are talking to clients, and people start to get into the motivation and into the what's going to happen and what do you see coming into the future, how do you advise people? Like, how do you continue to help them and be a fiduciary for clients through such uncertainty?
I think, first of all, I think that about 10 weeks ago, everybody was supposed to have magically gotten a prognosticating degree. We were all supposed to just be like, I don't know if you guys got your crystal ball in the mail. Mine's coming, I hope. But I think that there are a lot of people wanting information, or wanting to be told clarity that we aren't going to be able to provide, but what we can provide. And so what can we provide? And the data is still the data, and they still need to know it. So I think really starting that day, I remember saying to my team, to my leadership team, like, we're going to track this data and we're going to communicate the data, right? We're just going to talk to, how many houses are coming online, how many houses are going under contract. We're going to just speak to the facts and not try to crystal ball the crap out of the world, because we just can't. And I think that should be the quote, by the way, of this mastermind: crystal ball the crap out of the world. But I mean, it's true. There's a lot of crystal ballitis, and we can only control what we control. We have the data. Report the data.
I love that. That's great advice. So what one piece of advice would you leave the group with, and going through these times? I mean, let's kind of start to bring it all together, but what would you leave the group with, from an advice standpoint?
I guess to summarize, here's what I will say. I don't know about y'all, but I think most of us thrive on a little healthy competition. I would highly recommend you getting with a friend or two or three in the industry, perhaps in your market center, and have a contact off, right? I mean, and maybe some of you have been doing bold, and I hope all of you have, but the reality is, how seriously have you been with your partner? And if you have and you're knocking out, then you're doing it, right? If you haven't, or you're not doing bold, then grab somebody and get competitive and put something on the line, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be money or anything. Make it be embarrassing, maybe. But put something on the line. My team is having a contact off, and it's really helped our numbers. And what we've discovered, what the data is saying, by the way, is they're having to contact a lot more people than in the past 2 years to have the same results. And we're having better results. We're having the best year we've ever had. And we're incredibly prideful of that. And yet we realize the data has shown us, like, for this to continue, we're gonna have to find a new way. I've already found a new competition starting in, this one ends in the end of June. I already have one in July because we all need competition.
That's awesome advice. So accountability is what I'm hearing.
Accountability around the simplest things that we inevitably avoid because we're tired of hearing them or we want to complicate things.
So when did you notice, like, in your life, when you go back, because you made a couple of comments about the simplicity of things. It seemed like you'd always pull things back to simplicity. Like, was there a turning point for you from a business perspective in going back to that simplicity on things as you built? Or, like, how did that come about?
So glad Joseph hasn't said anything because he thought of a jillion things. So many smart things, funny things came through his mind just there, and he turned them down from saying it. And I appreciate that. So I'm the child of co-valedictorians. My dad went to Princeton. He loves to tell people that. And they're both really, really smart. My sister's an English master's. My brother was a math whiz. And I am a theater major. So there were a lot of jokes growing up about my, just teasing. And I never, I mean, as you guys can tell, right? I'm a pretty secure kid. I got rejected a bajillion times in acting. So I got comfortable with that. And ultimately, I think I kid and I joke, but the realization that you're imperfect, that we're all imperfect, and the comfort that really you should find in that we are all imperfect. And if the sooner that you embrace your imperfections and come to peace with them, the sooner that you will get ahead in life. And I think, I mean, not to get all deep, but that really is the key, in my opinion, to when I meet with folks I admire, right? Other business people that I admire, and I go to them constantly for advice. The number one key component is humility. They are incredibly aware of their imperfections and are in constant seek of betterment, of improvement. I mean, one conversation with Joseph, and you're aware, he's aware of his imperfections.
Touche. Yeah, I have a lot of them. It makes me feel really good. But,
yeah.
I can
Leadership.
That's awesome, Blake. Thank you so much. What does anybody else have any questions for Blake before we wrap up here?
Was this your least attended? I think this was your least attended. I heard Joseph say 15 to 40, and this one looks about 15. So you really sold me, Joseph. Really sold me well.
The problem was we said former actor. Totally got us. But
is that or Ohio?
That would be the selling point, but it wasn't. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, if you said former actor from Ohio, well, no wonder no one came.
Yeah. Oh, plus people on Facebook. There you go.
So my question, I've got a quick question.
Go ahead.
Because you interact with a lot of agents, both with your business as well as in the market centers, what are you seeing right now? I feel like there's a big, like we talked about the numbers before we started. There's a lot of positive numbers right now going on in Charleston from the market standpoint. There's a lot of talk across, everywhere of like I love the crystal ballitis, by the way, because I think that's creating some interesting behavior. And I think we're seeing both ends. I think we're seeing crystal ballitis that says, oh my gosh, the world is falling, 40 million unemployed. What the heck's going to happen? Katie bar the door. And then the total opposite end, highest contingents we've ever had. We have nothing to worry about. What are you seeing agents from your perspective? What are you seeing the biggest mistake agents are making right now in kind of how they're reacting to this?
Probably, I mean, it probably comes back to the data, right? It probably comes like how in the data are they? And where are they getting, I mean, right? MLS, just live in your MLS. I mean, we always should anyways, but right now, I don't know if there's ever been a more important time to turn off the TV other than, Netflix. And just not to watch national news or any, even local news, and to get into MLS and be out there for people because to that point right now, if people are watching the national news, they might not think they should sell. Oh man, I mean, they should be listing right now. And the bottom line is, I don't care what the data says right now. We all should be able to clearly look at the socioeconomic of what's happening and what's coming, and say next spring is not going to be as good as this spring. Like, it just isn't. So if you're a seller, yellow, right? And that's that conversation. And if you're not in the data, then you might not be paying attention to that, and you're not communicating that with enough passion to help folks not wait to next spring.
I like when you said that, the communicating it with enough passion, and that's only going to come from knowing it. So that's a good point.
That was good feedback. Anybody else have any questions?
I've got one. You had mentioned towards the end, comfortable with rejection on that. Oh, by the way, I'm a thespian as well. Set crew, not actor, set crew.
Okay.
But I'm one, man. I get it. Comfortable with rejection. What, besides like scripting role play, which I'm comfortable with, in other scenarios, what are some things that you've done in the past, or maybe with your team, that has gotten people to feel more comfortable with the thought of rejection or actually getting rejection? Any fun strategies or ideas with that?
Yeah, my favorite role play game is the when to why. Is essentially, pick up the phone, turn around from each other. I mean, in this world, in Zoom world, it's super easy. Although people like to look at the computer more, which messes up role play, right? If you're physically together, you turn around. So what I end up recommending is like literally minimizing or removing Zoom from your view and role playing with somebody if you're Zoom role playing. But I do this all the time with my ISAs, and my OSAs answer the phones on evenings and weekends a lot, which is we play the game of when to why, and you're just randomly on the phone with somebody and you have to find out their perfect world when, and then that often leads to their why. And that role play is, I teach win with buyers, and that's the number one, that's what we spend all morning doing is digging into the when. And it's an easy question. It's just, in a perfect world, when you're looking to move in, right? And yet I'm going to tell you that if you try that and you role play that, people will not answer it the first one or two times you ask it. So you have to get really comfortable with, and that's role play in general. You have to get really comfortable with repeating yourself.
Thank you. We're going to steal crystal ball-itis too.
Yeah.
By the way, that's the first time I just vomited it out.
I'm absolutely stealing that.
That's awesome. Anybody else have any questions for Blake before we let him go about his day and get into the role play or into the collaboration mastermind? Blake, you crushed it.
That was fun, you guys. I've done a few of these, and that might have been my favorite. All 15 of you who saw this, and 45 on Facebook. Thank you.
It's awesome, man. I can't thank you enough for your time. I know that you've had the opportunity to. Well, let me ask this question before we finish up real quick. What is the number one thing in all the masterminds that you've heard from Gary Keller? I mean, he's pretty smart. What is the number one thing that you've heard consistently from him through this COVID period from an implementation standpoint?
Is he's been pretty good about bringing in people who are doing different, through technology, different communication ways to connect with our people, right? Different Facebook competitions. One I loved the coloring contest, right? So if you've got a fair amount of client base with kids, it's a smart, right, way to get the bingo cards of like local restaurants because you want to be local. Just creative ways to connect. Because look, you can always say, "How you doing? Anything I can help you with?" Right? And don't go to Angie's list. Let me hit you up with anything that you need. And are you too looking to redo your backyard like half of my clients because you're home in it, hating it, right? So you can always do that stuff, but coming up with different creative ways. And I think it's not secretive. You guys should all be members of mastermind groups online and learn from them as to what are some of the Facebook tricks that they're doing.
That's awesome. That's so essentially figuring out creative ways to connect with people virtually.
Yeah.
Have more conversations.
Yeah, and just steal it from other people. I mean, I'm not creative. Not when it comes to social media.
Absolutely. Me neither. Trust me. That's awesome. So does anybody have any other questions? Real quick. Awesome. Blake, thank you so much. Feel free to stick around. We're going to break.